The words hung in the air like a slap across the face. "You're not qualified." Psaki had delivered them sharply, her voice laced with the certainty of someone who believed she had just ended the debate. The room went quiet for a moment, journalists frozen mid-scribble, cameras fixed, waiting for Senator John Kennedy's response. But Kennedy didn't rush. He leaned back in his chair, his eyes steady, lips curling into that slight half-smile that often masked the sharpest of his thoughts. He knew a moment like this could either break him or become the spark that defined him. It hadn't been an easy week for Kennedy. The hearing had already been tense, filled with interruptions, accusations, and the kind of political theater that left ordinary Americans shaking their heads in frustration. Kennedy had been pressing Psaki on her recent comments about government overreach, digging into the details with the kind of plain-spoken honesty that had made him both admired and controversial. But Psaki, sharp-tongued and polished from her years behind the White House podium, wasn't used to being challenged this way. Her dismissal had been more than just words up. It was an attempt to strip away his credibility. Live in front of millions. For a split second, Kennedy thought back to his roots in Louisiana, to the long nights his father worked 2 jobs just to keep food on the table, to his mother, who never once told him he couldn't achieve something, even when the odds were stacked against him, to the teachers who told him his accent and his background might limit him but who underestimated the grit that ran through his veins. And then he leaned forward, his voice calm but firm, carrying a weight that silenced the room. "Miss Psaki, with all due respect, a qualification isn't about whether you approve of me. It's about whether I fight for the people who sent me here. And last I checked, they didn't ask for perfecta, they asked for someone who tells them the truth." The words landed with a thunderclap. The room stirred. Even those who weren't fans of Kennedy felt the sincerity in his tone. He wasn't rattling off statistics or throwing out buzzwords. He was speaking from a place deeper than politics. He was speaking from experience, from scars, from the quiet, unseen battles of an ordinary life. Psaki blinked, her composure intact, but for the first time in the exchange, she had no immediate retort. The cameras caught eye to the pause, the moment of hesitation. Kennedy, sensing the shift, pressed on. "You see, being a-qualified isn't about going to the right cocktail parties in Washington, or repeating lines that sound good on TV. It's about understanding what it feels like to look at your paycheck and wonder if it'll cover groceries. It's about sitting at a kitchen table with a family that's worried about sending their kids to school safely. It's about representing people who don't have a voice in rooms like this one. And if that doesn't make me qualified, then maybe we need to change the definition." The audience here, reporters, staffers, and even political opponents, shifted uncomfortably. There was a truth in his words that was hard to deny, no matter how much one disagreed with his politics. Social media exploded within minutes. Clips of his comeback spread like wildfire on Twitter, on YouTube, on Facebook. Ordinary Americans replayed the moment, nodding, sharing, saying, "Finally, someone said it." Back home in Louisiana, Kennedy's words struck even deeper. In living rooms, diners, and churches, people recognized themselves in his comeback. They saw in him not just a senator, but a reminder that dignity and determination mattered more than the labels others tried to slap on you. Of course, the days that followed weren't without criticism. Pundits debated endlessly, Psaki defended her stance, and commentators tried to spin the narrative. But Kennedy didn't waver. He walked into every room with the same quiet confidence, knowing that no matter how loud the noise got, authenticity always had a way of cutting through. The viral moment wasn't just about politics, it was about something much larger. It was about every person who had ever been told they weren't good enough, weren't smart enough, weren't qualified. Kennedy's comeback became a rallying cry, that real worth isn't decided by titles or approval, but by the grit to stand firm in who you are and the courage to speak for those who can't. In the end, the story wasn't about Jen Psaki's jab. It was about the millions of Americans who saw themselves in Kennedy's response. It was about turning doubt into defiance, dismissal into determination. And it left one unshakable truth ringing in the air long after the cameras turned off. Sometimes the most qualified person is the one who refuses to stay silent when it matters most.